The difference between poor people, middle class people, and wealthy people is not how much money they make, is what they think the purpose of money is for. Poor people think the purpose of money is to give it away. So they make just enough money to pay all their bills. Middle class people think the purpose of money is to buy things that they can't afford to impress people that they don't like. So they buy expensive cars, buy expensive houses, and put themselves in debt. Wealthy people understand that the only purpose of money is to use your money to make more money. Period. So they take all their money and they invest it in assets. Then they borrow against those assets, tax-free, and then live off that, and then they buy life insurance and then die and then repeat the process. But what do you think the purpose of money is for? Is going to keep you rich or keep you poor?
Dude, a lot of people tell me all the time, they're like, yo, Rich, I'm broke right now. I don't have any money. Cash flow's tight. I'm like, dude, being broke is part of the game. Being broke is part of the game. Look at Elon Musk. The dude freaking had a big exit early on with PayPal. What did he do? He turned around and shoved all the chips all in, betting on himself on the next thing. And he went broke doing it, but now he has Tesla, he's got SpaceX, he's got all these companies, Starlink, multi-billion-dollar companies, and look where it's got him now. He's one of the world's wealthiest human beings today. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to become Elon Musk, but the takeaway is like being broke is part of the game, and you have to shove the chips all in, betting on yourself, using your money to make money.
Facts.
I love that. I love that.
Riches is measured in money, but wealth is measured in time. Right. And wealthy people understand that I want to own my time. And so rich people, wealth is an unexercised option, right? It's like you might not know how wealthy somebody is because you can't necessarily see it. Rich people want you to see it. Like, I got the land. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having those things, but they're putting their money in stuff, trinkets, toys. Wealthy people are putting their money in places that you might not even be able to see or know that they own it because they want to have time freedom. They want to know that all of my money or most of my money is coming from assets that I own that produce the cash flow so that whether I do anything actively or not, it doesn't matter. From my opinion, a true measure of wealth is your ability to say no, not your ability to say yes. Because you're typically having to say yes because you can't afford to say no. And so when you start putting your money in assets, going all in, betting on yourself, and acquiring these things that can produce the cash flow you need to maintain your lifestyle so that working becomes optional, that's when you've won the game.
Yeah, that's really good. I always say, figure out the life you really want, then say no to everything that isn't that. Starting is about saying yes. Growing is about saying no. You got to learn how to say no in this game. You can't say yes to everything. Question for you guys. You guys put out some content on like NBA player salaries. What is the NBA salary? Like what is NBA salary taxes? I'm sorry. NBA salaries after taxes are insane. Break that down.
Yeah. So the unfortunate reality when it comes to NFL players and NBA players is they think they have more money than they're actually keeping. So on a $5 million salary, half of that is gone, depending on where you're playing at. Federal tax, state tax, self-employment taxes, city taxes, half of that is already gone. You have 5%, 5 to 10% in agency fees. Then you have to pay NBA dues. So you can, when it's all said and done, you could be looking at keeping maybe 37 to 40% of your money, but then you take care of all your family, taking care of all your friends. And now you don't have any money left over. So you thought you made $5 million, but you really like making 1.5 take home, but you're spending like you're making 5 million. And I think that athletes go broke, not because they're just financially illiterate. There's a big disparity between what their contract says and what they're taking home. And they don't realize that until it's too late.
Yeah. I had Golden Tate on, NFL Pro Bowl or Super Bowl champ, and he was saying like after the 35% that's really left over, I mean, even in his big contract years where he was doing, I think he had a couple contracts that were over 30 million. And he said even in those years, the 35% that was left over, it would all go to taking care of his boys, private jet to Vegas, taking everyone out, bottle service, nice dinner, splurging. And that money would just be really quick going out the door. And he said the money going out the door was more than he was bringing in.
And the problem with that is all the people you're spending money on, because of how big the lifestyle is, they can't help you recoup it. It's way too big for them. It's like, what do you want me to do? I make $100,000 a year, right? So that's the problem.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But, some of these guys are great at investing. Like LeBron, Kobe did good with his money. But then you see some of these other guys like Allen Iverson. He had a lot of money in his career. I believe the dude's got like a less than $1 million net worth today.
But one of the best things that somebody did for him is they set up basically like an annuity when he did his deal with Reebok. I think when he turns 55, he's gonna have a big lump sum of money that he'll have access to. But if he would have got all that money in the beginning of his career,
it would have been gone.
It would have been gone.
Yeah. Okay. That's crazy stuff, man. So speaking of investing, how can one invest the same dollar 3 times?
Yeah. Yes, we touched on it a little bit, but I'll break it down further. So, first, you want to set up your brokerage account. And the reason why we recommend setting up a brokerage account is because unlike a retirement account, that allows you to borrow against the value of the assets inside of it, right? So the fundamental difference being if I have $100,000 invested in my brokerage account, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, whoever, they'll let me borrow probably up to 50% of that portfolio value, right? So the first step is I want to invest my money into the brokerage account. That could be, investing in Google, it could be investing in Meta, Tesla, whatever stocks make sense for your risk profile, right? Then step 2 is while that money's growing and compounding, I'm identifying another asset that I want to invest in. Maybe I want to buy a laundromat, right? Like Cody Sanchez, or maybe I want to buy something. I want to buy real estate like Rich, right? Cool. Once I've identified that asset that I want to purchase, instead of selling my shares, because people will say, buy low, sell high. The problem is if you want to build generational wealth, you want to be able to hold assets for a generation. You don't want to sell them, right? So then you borrow against the value of that portfolio to then go buy that other asset, whether it's, like I said, real estate or buying a business. And then ultimately, in a perfect world scenario, that asset is going to produce cash flow. And then we take the cash flow that it spits off and then we reinvest that back into the portfolio. So now your money's working for you in 3 different ways, all because of where you put it first. Because I could have took the money from my bank account to buy that, put the down payment on a real estate property, but now it's not growing and compounding anymore. It's removed from my bank account. Right?
And speaking of, the number one way I see a lot of people kind of trap themselves is they'll go put a bunch of money down on a primary residence, and that money's just stuck into this real estate deal. And I think primary residence is not really an asset. You got expenses, you got property taxes, insurance, repair and maintenance, HOA payment, all this stuff that people don't take into consideration. But because it's not an investment, you're typically not forcing a lot of appreciation. So you might not have a way to refi money out for quite some time. And there's a huge opportunity cost in doing that. So that's why, like for me, I rent where I live. And for me, it makes a lot of sense because in San Diego right now, it's a lot cheaper to rent than it is to own, especially with the interest rate environment the way it is right now. And then I can save all that savings and go put that down on real estate deals that are going to pay me cash flow and get me a lot more depreciation tax benefits. And I have a clear path to force a lot of appreciation and kind of refi and roll that money over and over. But I think that's the number one way, at least I see people in my network kind of making that mistake is they're putting all their money into a primary residence. Then now that money is trapped up, locked up, and they can't invest into other assets.
100%. Primary residence is an investment from the vantage point of your emotional well-being, right? The place of peace. You can raise your family there. It's a place to call home. But if we just look at the math objectively, it's not a great investment. It's not really much of an investment at all, right? Quite frankly, financially. But from an emotional well-being standpoint, if you're at a place where you've done the right things, you've invested it in other places, get your primary residence that you love, that you can host your family, host your friends. Now you can, of course, like we just did a team member event there at my house, right? You still can find ways to make it an investment, right? Leveraging the Augusta Rule, whatever the case may be. But ultimately, there's much better ways to invest your money than a primary residence.
What is the Augusta Rule?
Yeah, so the Augusta Rule, and for all my golfers out there, the Masters.
This guy's got the green jacket on already.
Yeah, happy accident, right? And so, the Masters is the flagship tournament in the PGA, right? That every golfer knows about. And a number of years ago, somebody wanted to rent their home out, right? But the IRS was like, no, you can't do that. And so when he found business use for it, ultimately now there's an IRS rule called the Augusta Rule. And ultimately what you can do is you can rent your home out for up to 14 days, right? And then ultimately as the owner of that residence, you're going to receive that rental income, right? Tax-free. And then it's a tax deduction for the business. And so imagine having a primary residence that, you can rent out for business use. And even though I own the house, right, my business had to meet somewhere, right? My team members, we had to meet somewhere. I said, hey, what would be the fair market value of me renting my house out at this time, right? Then ultimately the business now has to pay me that rental income. That is tax-free income to me, and it's a tax deduction to the business. And now ultimately I'm able to use my primary residence as an asset in that context while getting a tax benefit as well.
And is there a limit to how many times you can use the Augusta Rule?
Was it 14 days, right?
14 days a
14
year.
days a year. Yeah.
14 days a year. Okay.
What most people don't realize about the Augusta Rule is you get to pick the 14 days you get to use. So I'm not using a random 14 days. I'm going to pull up the calendar of my city and see what are the biggest events that's coming to my city. We got Beyonce concert, we got the Super Bowl, we got big games. I'm going to strategically pick those 14 days when my city has the most foot traffic. Why? Because it's going to increase the rent comp that I'm going to have for that day. So I might have only been able to get $1,000 a day. But if I rent it out when the Super Bowl's in town, I might be getting $2,500 a day. So now I just 2.5x'd my deduction. So now instead of getting a $14,000 deduction, I'm getting a $20,000 or $30,000 deduction for leveraging the Augusta Rule. So a key we have our clients is pull up your city, pull up the biggest events, do the Augusta Rule those days to maximize your deduction.
So I have a luxury short-term rental out in Scottsdale, and it does very well year round. Now I like to do like one team trip a year out there. We'll go out there for 3-4 days, talk about work, talk about business, talk about planning and that sort of thing. And so maybe, or can I leverage this Augusta Rule with that short-term rental, even though it's a short-term rental the rest of the year?
The problem with that is the Augusta Rule was on your primary residence.
It has to be primary residence. Gotcha. Okay. So it would not work for that.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What are some of the tax benefits of buying a business? Because a lot of people talk about the tax benefits of buying real estate, but what are the tax benefits of buying a small business?
Yeah, so for high income W-2 earners, they usually only think that they can get tax deductions by buying real estate when they actually can get tax deductions for buying businesses. So if you buy a business that has assets on the books, let's say you buy a laundromat, but it has $300,000 of equipment on the books. When you buy that laundromat, you're also buying the depreciation that comes with that laundromat. So now I'm buying cash flow, but I also get to take advantage of that depreciation for all those assets. And depending on how the business does, I could have depreciation losses against my other active income at work. So we tell people you don't have to become an entrepreneur to save on taxes, but you do have to become an owner. And one of the ways you can do that is by buying an already established business that has equipment, and you can depreciate that equipment against your active income at work.
And to take it a step further, you buy a laundromat that comes with the real estate, and you buy the real estate too. Now you're getting the depreciation from all the equipment, the FF&E, but in addition to it, you do a cost seg study on the building, and now you get to write off all the depreciation against the building in addition to it. And by the way, the building probably go up in value over time. You can borrow against it, get you tax benefits, principal pay down, and some cash flow along the way.
Yeah. The best analogy I heard about money, shout out to Myron Golden. He said, the difference between poor people, middle class people, and wealthy people is not how much money they make. He said the difference between poor people, middle class people, and wealthy people is what they think the purpose of money is for. Poor people think the purpose of money is to give it away. So they make just enough money to pay all their bills. Middle class people think the purpose of money is to buy things that they can afford to impress people that they don't like. So they buy expensive cars, buy expensive houses, and put themselves in debt. Wealthy people understand that the only purpose of money is to use your money to make more money. Period.